Theology is for everyone. And here, as we've considered what theology is, Scripture, and God, this inevitably moves us now to consider humanity and sin. How has God made all things? Who are we? And what's happened? Because certainly, if God made all things good, things have not remained that way. And why is that the case? Why are we dealing with such tremendously difficult issues in our life, in our culture, in our world? So let's see for a moment here, what does the Bible say about humanity, about sin, and how we are then to live now based on those truths? So first, let's just consider the first two chapters of the Bible. What do Genesis 1 and 2 say in relationship to who we are? And you may say, well, who cares? We're not there anymore, which I understand, but we also recognize Genesis 1 and 2 give us guidelines to know that's the aim or trajectory we should have in relation to living for God and how He'd want us to live our lives. So originally, we recognize we are created beings, and God made us. We aren't self-made creatures. We are created beings. This is the creator-creation distinction, we call this, which is huge. Think of 1 Corinthians 4:7, which says simply, what do you have that you did not receive? And the answer, of course, is, well, I've received everything I have from a gracious God. And that being the case, we shouldn't be a prideful people, but a humble people, recognizing any athletic ability or academic ability or whatever else is simply a gift from God. Second here, we're created in the image of God. Now, we'll see in a moment here that that image is marred by sin, but what it means to be made in God's image is that you and I have been given capacities, things like knowledge, a mind, right? Emotions and affections, and a will. Capacities we've been given to know God and relate to Him, to know and relate to other people, and to do the work that God has set us on earth to do, to be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth and have dominion over this world. Third, we're made male and female. Of course, this is a major issue in our culture today to think through, but just to say briefly here, God has made us male and female. There's not to be confusion here. There is meant to be clarity here in terms of who God has called us to be as men and women, in terms of marriage, being one man and one woman for life. That's the call that God put on our lives way back in Genesis chapters 1 and 2. We're called to be fruitful and have dominion. And God made us, and of course sin affects this in various ways. We're made by God to bear children. We're made by God to get into the world and to subdue and have dominion over it, to rule it in effect under God's sovereignty as His vice regent, like his under rulers, if you will, and to order it in a way that God would have us to do it. And finally, we were created to worship God. Psalm 115 verse 1 says, "Not to us, O Lord, not to us, but to your name be the glory because of your steadfast love and faithfulness." Well, that being the case, we should live our lives as lives of worship before Him. That's our original created destiny. And of course, sin occurs. What happened to humanity? Like, why is that still not the case? Why are we not in the Garden of Eden? Why did it change? Genesis chapter 3 comes along. And there we see the origins of sin, that humanity fell into sin, and therefore we're all born with a sin nature. The origins of sin is the story of humanity falling into sin. Adam and Eve rebelling against God's express command, and then bringing sin and death into this world for all their offspring afterwards. Even creation itself is, it says, groaning, waiting for the day of redemption. Now, original sin means that all of us by nature are sinful. We are originated with sin in our nature and character. We're born in Adam. And as he was sinful, so we are sinful. That's a problem, friends. That means we are not able to relate to God in the ways that we should, and we are distanced from Him. And David said in Psalm 51, "In sin did my mother conceive me." Right, Romans 1 and 2 are pretty pessimistic chapters about the fact there's, even Romans 3, there's none righteous, no, not one. No one seeks after God, no, not one. Ephesians 2, 1 to 3 speaks of this, that we're dead in our trespasses and sins. We're by nature children of wrath, like the rest of mankind. John 3:36, that we are, actually, if we don't believe what God's calling us to believe in, we are under God's wrath. The wages for our sin is death, and all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. We sin, we deviate from God's purposes for our lives in thought, attitude, action, word. We do what we should not do, and we don't do what we should do. You may say, man, Jeremy, could you please move along here? But I want to have us recognize this, because without the recognition of the bad news, there's no recognition of the good news. If we don't understand our plight and our need as people, if we don't see that we are in desperate need of God to do something that we can't do ourselves, we are not going to come to Him for salvation in the way that we need to. So I want to impress upon us, we are sinners. We are rebels. We are enemies of God naturally. That's the state that we're conceived and born in. So something needs to happen. We need to be saved out of this whole issue of sin and death, and to see God do some kind of work. And we'll see next time the kind of work that God does in Jesus Christ to accomplish that salvation. But some thoughts here for application for thinking about humanity and sin. First, place a high value on all of life and seek to turn from any hint of racism or prejudice. Why do I say this? Well, if humanity is made in God's image, being made in God's image is a great leveler. Meaning, if we are people, humans, made in God's image, then regardless of gender or age or ethnicity or socioeconomic status or background or any other dividing line you can think of, God is saying, I see you as being made in my image. In need of salvation, for sure, but being made in my image. And therefore, racism, prejudice, gossip, and slander, these should not be the ways we operate with fellow human beings. Second, we should embrace a complementarian approach to life. Now, that term complementarian simply means we want to recognize God made us male and female. We want to recognize that God made us equal in value and dignity and worth, but there are differences that we possess in terms of role and function as we operate as men and women, that God made men to lead in the home, to lead in the church as pastor elders, and that He made women to support their husbands and to submit to church leadership as well, along with other people in the church, submitting to leadership there as well, that we'd see the roles God has called us to in those ways, and that they're good, God-designed ordering of life. Next here, we want to fight sin strategically. I have that acronym ANTHEM there, which stands for this. A is avoid. Avoid sin if you can. N is say no. When temptation comes up, and it will come up, we want to say no to it quickly. T is turn your mind. Turn your mind to the truths of Scripture. And then H is hold that truth in your mind and hold it there for a good amount of time, because temptation doesn't just go away automatically. Hold it there. E, as you're doing those things, is enjoy God as a better satisfaction than what that sin offers. because he is. He is. And believe that. And then M is move. Go do something and get out of there to continue to go forward and get out of that temptation and that sin possibility. So friends, we're trying to think through the ways in which we can recognize we are made with dignity as God's people, but sin is real. It's real. So we want to be able to recognize our need to respect our fellow humans that are around us, but also recognize there's an issue of sin that goes deep, and we need to deal with that issue at the core, which comes in the work and the person of Jesus Christ.